Hello and welcome everybody to another video in our series of SQL Fundamental. And in today's video, we'll be talking about derived table. And today's video will take a different approach to do everything from scratch to explain what a derived table is. But before I jump into SQL, I want to explain to us what exactly is a derived table. A derived table is nothing other than a virtual table. It is a table that is dynamically created at runtime. This table is always found on the from clause, just like every other table. And we construct this derived table from a set of queries that we feel or deem it necessary that is very, very helpful to our code. So why derived table? Why not just use the exact table that we have? One of the benefit of a derived table is that it simplifies a complex queries. Um, and it also help us to really break down codes, or rather than going into a specific table and picking up the whole columns and the whole tables and records from that table, we can construct a specific queries and make them into table. We can break down complex queries into smaller and more manageable sub kind of queries. We can reuse those logic because it helps us to break down the complex logic or calculations that are used in the multiples of queries, and it also improves readability so we can easily understand how it works. So let me jump to SQL and walk us through what a derived table looks like and how it is really helpful when we write a code. So I'm going to jump into SQL, and when you launch SQL, before you start writing a query, you need to go to your new query before you start writing any kind of code. And before I can write anything, I will first of all call the database that I want to run the query from. And this will be our database that has been in the whole series. And I will press F5 to run the code. And now I have run my code and I can see the tables on the top. Now, on this table, we have something called, I'm just going to randomly call a particular table. I'll call the DBO dot patient table. If I run this patient table, I can see that this patient table have informations. Let me check for another table. Let me see, because I can see an address, let me go to the address table. So I'm trying to make a case here so that you see what I'm talking about. DBO dot address table. If I run this address table, I can see an address ID. Now, if I have a desire of getting the first name and last name from this table and getting the street address and city from this table, and now locating where each first name and last name lives in terms of their street address and city, I can do a join. So if I come down here, for example, and I say the first name and I say the last name, if I run this code, I can see that this is a separate table. I have a first name and a last name. And now I can come down here. In this table, there is a street address and there is a city. And if I run this code, I can see that there is a street address and there is a city. There is no first name and last name, but every first name and last name are potentially people who live in a specific address. So they have street name, street address, and city. I want to do a join using the address ID, right? So I'll call this table as Yeti, and I want to do a join, and I say inner join dbo dot the address, right? And I'll call this address as add. Just call it add. Where do I want to join it on? I want to join it on the PAT dot address ID, and that will also equal AD dot address ID. Now with this, if I run this code, I can see that I have the first name and last name, but I want to add the street address to it, so I can add the street address, and I can also add the city. If I run this code now, I can see the information around it. But this is a join, regular join pointing to the exact table that we need, which is the address table. What if I can convert this query that I have into a table and use it as a join into this particular code? So let me copy this guy, put this guy separate. So what we just did, forget about it. Take it off your mind. Let's come back to what we want to do now. What if I can convert this code to a table and also convert this code to a table and use it as a join? And once I am able to convert this guy to a table, I now have something we call a derived table. So let me convert this guy to a table by doing something like this. Remember, if I want to write a query, I will say select star from. I call the table name. For example, I call DBO dot patient table. This is how I can call a regular table. But I want to convert this query into a derived table. So meaning this place that I call a table, I can substitute it with this my potential derived table. So I can come down here, copy this query, but before I do that, because I'm going to be doing a join, I will add the address ID as part of my table column. And if I run this code, I can see that I have address ID, first name, and last name. But my goal is I want to substitute this guy. I want to convert this guy to a table, this entire thing to a table. So where I call the table on the from clause, I can copy this query, take this guy off, open parentheses, and close the parentheses. And give it a name, or give it an alias as, I can call it DRV table, so derived table. Now, inside of the open and close parentheses, I will paste this code that I have here. Now, with this code inside of this open and close parentheses, I now have it as a derived table. So now this query is now a derived table called DRV table. Let me put another information, PAT, which is for patient, derived table for patient. And if I run the entire thing right now, I can see that I am selecting star from this particular query. This particular query has been converted into a table called derived table. So that is the idea of a derived table. I'll show us another benefit also. But now, I'll clear this guy off because that is what we have on here. Now, like what we have here as a join, I want to join this, I want to convert this guy to a table and join it to this entire query. So what I can do now, I can come down here, but I still have to put the address ID. So I put address ID, put a comma. I still now have to join it. So I can come down here, I say inner join. I will open and close a parenthesis, and I will call this guy Dervied Table and call this guy address. Inside of this open and close parenthesis, I will cut this code and place it inside of the open and close parenthesis. Now, this guy is a derived table made up of this query. This guy is a derived table made up of this query. And now I can complete my join by saying, I'll put this guy here, by saying, and now on this point, I can give this guy an alias again. I think the alias won't work. So because I already have it as an alias. So now I can come down here and I say on, I call this guy. This is the derived table from this guy. Dot, it has an address ID. Immediately see it selected the columns that are made up of that table. And I come here, I say equal to this derived table dot the same exact column that is made up of that table. Now watch what happened. If I run the whole code, I can see now that it selected the whole information. So far, so good. Now, this is the best part that made me like derived table. Remember, we can never have an alias in a where clause. But with table expression, derived table to be specific at this point, we can do that. So if I come down here and change this first name, for example, and say this first name as, I will put a square bracket and put first space name. If I run the code now, I can see that I have first space name. If I want to find where the first name equals Robert, I can come down here. At the end of my code, I can treat it as a regular table. I say where the first, where the first space name, this guy, where it equals Robert. Now, this is a valid code because why? It is coming from a derived table. Now, if I run this code like this, I can see that it works. Number one, it ran. It didn't blow up and said we cannot have uh, an alias in a where clause, but it worked. So at this point, we can see the benefit that the derived table is coming with. So rather than me going to the entire table to call the from clause or going to the entire table of the address to join, I design my code, prep it very well, and ensure that the code that I am supplying as my join is just the specific columns that I need, nothing else, right? And now I can still take this guy to the next level. Rather than select star, I can specifically select the columns that I need. Now see the trick. If I call this address ID, comma, and I cannot call this first underscore name anymore because it is never recognized by this select statement. But let's keep going and see what the error will be. I'll put this and I will come down here and put this. And the last one, I put the city. Now, if I run it, there are two errors, but let's ignore it and just run the code for now. Two errors. One is ambiguous column. One is the first name is not recognized. Let's tackle the first name. No, let's tackle the ambiguous column. The ambiguity of this information is because the address ID exists in the derived table of the DRV table and also exists in the DRV add table. So it's asking me to specify. So I can come down here and say, I want this one. I give it an alias. Please, if you don't understand this piece, remember the join that we did. You will see why we get that information. So if I come down here and run it, now we have one error that says the first name is not recognized. And this is because the code do not recognize the first name. It only recognizes the first name with a space. So I can come down here, copy this guy, and place it here. And when I do that, it works. And if I come, I checked, not, I want to run the whole thing. So I can check excluding the where clause, run it. Now I get the whole thing. Now let me pause for 1 second. Somebody would tell me that, why do I have to write this long thing when I can easily get this code like this? There's a lot of benefit to a derived table, lots and lots of benefit. Remember in the patient table, for example, there could be other columns that you probably don't need. And if you want to do specific, so if you're trying to join to 10 tables, let me say, take, for example, 10 tables, and from each table you want to do specific calculations, it is always beneficial that you do it in a derived table because you do each individual table with their own specific logic, and all you do, you just call that particular logic as your select statement. Rather than joining all of them, then you come in on the select statement, you do this long logic for each particular column. It's a little bit tedious or kind of stretch if you think about it. But the true thing is that the derived table it can break down complex things. It breaks down the complex queries or code into little chunks. So each particular table has its own specific logic and so on and so forth. So that is the benefit of a derived table, and it has a lot of benefits. And if you are confused, just take it one step at a time. The first thing you do, remember that you have to open and close a parenthesis and give the table a name. Then whatever logic that you have prepared, tested, and trusted, you can dump it inside of the open and close parentheses. And you treat every other columns as every other derived table as the way you would treat other tables. Select from it, do whatever thing that you want, and you should be good. And that is it for the derived table piece. And we'll be working on another um, table expression. This time we'll be working with CTE. And after CTE, we'll jump into views. And after views, we're going to do a Windows function. So stick around on the videos. Interesting things are coming. But derived table has its own information. But remember, another rule is that the derived table has its own rule. The rule is that every columns inside of each of the derived table must have a name. Every columns in the derived table must have a name, and they also have to be unique, and order by is not guaranteed. For example, Right here, for example, I can come down here. I can say in the patient name, there is something called date of birth. Date of birth. If I try to do, okay, I'm not going to introduce one thing that will make me not to have a column name. So I'll do it a different way. So if I come here and create an empty string and call that guy as empty, I'll just put a comma here. See what happened. If I run this guy, it will run. No problem, and gives me empty stuff, right? Empty information. But if I come down and take this empty, cut it and put it inside of this open and close parenthesis and take this alias, supposed alias off and run this guy, it ran no problem, but fill those columns with empty. And it does not have a column name. It has no problem running, the query ran. But another thing is that if I take this same behavior and put it on one of these derived table, which is for the patient, and place it here, the moment I do that, I hover around this squiggly line, it tells me no column was specified for the column number 4. That is a rule breaker. Every column in a derived table must have a name. So if I run it without the where clause, it tells me every column must have a name. Now, that is rule number 1. Rule number 2 is that I'll take this guy off. Rule number 2 is that I'll come down here. If I copy, I'll take this one off. If I duplicate this city, it doesn't have a problem. It have 2 cities, no problem. The query ran successfully. But if I perform the same behavior for this particular code, I take the city, duplicate it, and place it right here. If I duplicate it and run it, I'll take this where clause off, distracting me. If I duplicate it and run it, it tells me the column city was specified multiple times for this. That is a problem. Now, the next one is that if I come down to this query and put an order by, I say, let's order by the first name. And if I run this code, I do not have a problem, it ran. But if I take this behavior again and come down and place it on this code on the patient table and run it and check, it tells me that the order by clause in views, inline function, derived table, subquery, and common table expression is not allowed, it's invalid, right? So those are the 3 rules we need to pay attention to. When we're working with derived table, all the columns must have a name. The names must be unique. Order by is not guaranteed. So for this, I'm just going to take the order by off. So remember the rules. So let me put it here just in case you need this code. So I can put it here and say rules of derived tables. 1, all columns in the derived table must have a name. And 2, all column names must be unique. And next, 3, order by is not required. Sorry, order by the tables, each derived table is not allowed to have an order by except with top. But now, somebody will ask, what if I want to sort my record? What do I do? If I want to sort the record, I can come down at the end of the code. I can say order by the first space name is what the query knows, order by this guy. And now if I run it, the code runs. And this will be the end of the video. Please encourage me, help the community build the channel, subscribe, click on the notification button so that you'll be notified when a new video comes up. And our next video will be the CTE. Then we'll go take it from there and talk about other stuff. So stick around, comment on the video, like it, subscribe it, share it, and thank you very much. And we'll be coming up with the next video. Thank you and have a great day. Bye-bye.